of 3 webinars that Roger Wilco, over to you, and Julia Ulfeldt are hosting to unpack some of the findings from the 2020 South African Digital Customer Experience Report. For this session on the customer experience of getting the money and delivering the goods, we've got a star lineup with panelists from Nedbank, Pargo and Peach Payments. More on them in a moment. But before we start, some quick housekeeping. We're going to be recording the session and we'll send a link to everybody in the next few days. If you've got a question for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A dialogue at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll try to answer the questions towards the end of the session. So to kick off, a little on our presenters. Julia, perhaps introduce yourself.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Julia Ulfeldt. I'm a certified customer experience professional and business advisor, guiding organizations on how to gain market leadership through customer centricity. I'm originally from the United States. You can probably hear from my accent, but I'm now based in Cape Town. I've worked with blue chip clients such as JP Morgan Chase, American Express, ABSA, Old Mutual, and Virgin to deliver on their brand promise and foster customer loyalty through great experiences. I try to bring a mix of global and local, leveraging my experience and knowledge of global best practices and understanding of the local market to unite organizations around the customer through things like journey mapping, leadership alignment, and experience design. Very happy to be here today on this webinar.
Hey, I'm Amanda Reiki. I'm a marketer, but I'm also a researcher. I own a business called Imagination Alliance, which is a brand and marketing strategy business and a real world research business, which has been plying its trade since 2001. And then in 2013, we launched Over to You, which is it's an online research platform with an associated panel of over 18,000 respondents in South Africa, and then a further several thousand across Africa. The study was really, obviously we did the research, but it's also been really useful to me as I consult with brands in terms of delivering and growing robust brands. And my fundamental belief is that customer experience is brand experience in this day and age. So look forward to a robust conversation.
Great, and I'm Charlie Stewart. I'm the founder and chief executive of Roger Wilco. We're an independently owned digital marketing agency. And being so centered in digital, of course, online customer experience is absolutely everything to our clients and to our agency as a whole. Really looking forward to being involved and taking you all through some of our findings from the research today. So let's get straight into it.
Yeah, so we're all here because earlier this year we conducted the 2020 South African Digital Experience Survey, which led to the report. It was conducted with 2,000 online respondents, and it's the second year in a row that we've done it. You'll see that apart from a gender skew, which is quite standard, firstly from a consumer perspective, but also from a research perspective, we have a very good spread of age, race, province, and income represented in the respondents. One of the findings of the study, unsurprisingly, was that delivery and payment are key parts of managing the brand experience and are also reasons why people use online less frequency. So if you look at the top 3 reasons why people say that they don't want to use online as often as they might, they are all around delivery and payments. So the shipping fees are too high. I don't like putting my credit card details in online, and delivery takes too long. The logistics of delivering the goods is one of the primary reasons that consumers or customers are disappointed, and it's also one of the biggest reasons for abandoned transactions. And high delivery fees were cited by 63% of respondents as a reason for abandoning their transactions. And the interesting thing with this is that this was even true amongst consumers with more spending power. So it didn't matter how rich people were, high delivery fees put them off equally. What's also noteworthy here is that the large e-commerce players have set the norms for the whole industry. So really free delivery becomes the norm, and the rest of the industry and smaller players are expected to fall in line by consumers.
I think we found that in addition to the logistics of delivering the goods, that it really is, I mean, the delivery component is one of the primary areas of consumer disappointment. So even if people are willing to pay fees or higher fees to get their product delivered, challenges and issues with the delivery turnaround times were causing tremendous frustration. Too many e-commerce sites promise delivery dates and then fail to deliver on them. That leads to cancelled orders. Cancelled orders naturally leads to tremendous frustration and ill feeling towards the brand. But even if the product arrives on time, around about 34% of our panel of respondents complained about items being damaged in transit or delivery just taking too long. So it really impairs the experience. I think if we're able to get the delivery point right, and we come up against this time and time again, and again it was discussed in the webinars that we held yesterday that the last mile is where e-commerce either wins or fails in South Africa. Getting it right would really mitigate an enormous amount of the frustration and the fallout that we see when organizations fail to meet customer expectations. Getting the money is also quite important. I mean, it's the bedrock for all e-commerce players. Just under half of our respondents claim to have experienced a failure in the actual payment process itself. Payment failures aren't great. They really inhibit the trust that we have in retailers. That in turn leads to a reluctance to shop online with credit cards. We're quite surprised many people still claim to be averse to entering their credit card details. Around about 46% of our sample said that they have concerns and worries about sharing credit card information with vendors. So there's a question here, is this a trust issue with the retailer? Is it a trust issue with the broader payment process? It's definitely something that we still need to address. There's a consumer education job that must be done. Mans, I think you're muted.
I'm muted, sorry. You'll see that the respondents say this very eloquently themselves. So if you see these three quotes, the one was really around someone who found that when it came to cash out, delivery costs were more than the actual purchase, obviously not workable. The second was around delivery taking too long. And I think there are 2 points here. The one was that it took too long, and the other was that the promise was within 2 or 3 days. So the expectation wasn't managed properly. And then the third was about the payment being stuck in a buffering loop. And the transaction couldn't complete, and I had to wait hours before attempting the same transaction as the site said a similar order was being processed. So to Charlie's earlier point, often, and I've actually been challenged on this specific finding around why are so many people still reluctant to put credit cards in. I think these kinds of problems impact on the trust overall. So something like this buffering loop impacts on, it happens on one side, but it impacts all online businesses as trust is lost.
Both payment and delivery are key moments of truth. These moments have extra complexity owing to the involvement of third-party providers, despite the fact that consumers probably don't look at experiences that way. These experiences are dependent on retailers having the right products, so delays aren't always due to logistics, something that was highlighted by several of the retailers who contributed to the study. When you disappoint customers through payment glitches or delivery issues, it erodes trust and damages the brand. When we think about digital customer experience, these moments might not seem like they're the most sort of sparkly or exciting, but they're really the moments that matter. We live in a world of instant gratification. Consumers are increasingly taking to online shopping, but they still want the familiar, trustworthy payment experience and quick access to their products. They want all the best parts of the online experience without giving up what they've grown accustomed to with traditional retail. Now it's up to organizations to figure out how to seamlessly deliver this, or they're going to risk alienating their customers. And with that, I'd like to move on to our panel of experts to help us unpack these points and explore how organizations can ensure that both payments and delivery are adding to the customer journey, not eroding it. With us today, we have a fantastic panel of experts. We have Rahul Jain from Peach Payments, Lars Vuhl from Pargo, Kenneth Kaiser from Nedbank. And before we dive into the questions, I'd like to invite each of the panelists to share a little bit about themselves. Kenneth, would you like to kick things off?
Thank you, Julia. Yes, so my name is Kenneth. I head up mobile e-commerce and open banking at Nedbank, corporate investment banking. And I'm responsible for developing a number of innovative propositions for our business and corporate clients, which includes new e-commerce platforms and solutions, but also new payment innovations. I have also, over the number of years, developed a number of other innovations, both in the retail space, into the market, and won a number of global awards for that. And really looking forward to sharing some insights around some of these key pain points within payments and delivery.
Great. Rahul, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Rahul here. I'm one of the co-founders of Peach Payments. We started Peach 8 years ago now, and currently processing in South Africa, Kenya, and Mauritius. Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to this. Prior to starting Peach, I worked in strategy consulting in the US, and did a lot of work for large retailers, airlines, and some of the insights that you're seeing here, I can relate to, and we found these in surveys as we did in the US and in some of the other Western European markets as well. So it's a global topic.
Wonderful. And last but most certainly not least, Lars.
Thanks, Julia. I'm Lars, the co-founder of Pargo. Originally from the Netherlands, moved to South Africa 8 years ago and used to be in e-commerce. I actually moved to South Africa to help set up Groupon back then, and was running into a lot of the challenges around logistics and delivery firsthand in my previous job, which brought me to the idea to quit my job and try to solve the problem together with my co-founder Derek, and that's how we started Pargo. So we're in the last mile logistics space and do deliveries for e-commerce businesses.
Fantastic. Well, it's really great to have you all with us today, and let's just dive right into the discussion. So our research highlighted that both payment and delivery are key moments of truth. Why do you think that is, and what about these experiences makes them so important to the customer journey? Let's start with payments, since that normally precedes delivery in the customer journey. Rahul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, payments plays a critical role in digital commerce today, right? Like if you think about it, at the end of the day, it's the last step. It's, every merchant, every business cares about conversion. And the one metric we're all tracking is, hey, what's our conversion rate? And what that means is how many visitors was I able to attract to my digital channel? That could be an app, that could be a website. And then at the end of the day, what was the purchase that this consumer made, right? And in that journey, the last step is payments. So we always, we often say we're the most mission critical part of a digital channel, because payments either makes it or breaks it, right, for you. So I think from a consumer experience or a customer experience perspective, one thing that we've been very focused at Peach Payments, and this is one of the core focus areas for us, has been around this user experience, right? So when we started back in 2012, 2013, we were the only provider that offered merchants to keep the user on their checkout page, to not have any Peach Payments branding. So you actually don't know that you might be transacting with us because we're not present on the use on. So let's take an example. If you're checking out with Zando, we process every transaction, right? So I think that user experience, that seamless experience, has been central to some of the unique value proposition that we've offered merchants. So I think from a payments perspective, it makes a huge difference, right?
It's probably one of the few instances where, you want the experience to be something that's seamless. You actually don't want the brand that's providing the service to stand out. If the consumer doesn't think twice about it, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah. I do think that varies on the size of the business or the merchant as well, right? For the larger businesses, where the brand already has a presence in the market, and you as a consumer trust the brand of the merchant itself, we tend to be more seamless and behind the scenes. One, I think you mentioned around the trust deficit that we are seeing with consumers, and that trust deficit really comes from three areas, right? One is the merchant fraudulent? Is the merchant actually real? Am I really going to get that product? That's a big concern. That happens when the merchant's brand is not very well known or you don't trust it. So from a Peach perspective, that's a particular area of problem that we are starting to tackle in a big way, right? So you're going to see and hear about new things that we're going to do to help build that trust between the consumer and the merchant and play our role. The second area is around security and data security, right? So why are people worried about using their card data? So how can we educate the consumer in our way to trust digital payments? And I think the third area is just transparency in pricing. I think that's an often underlooked or overlooked area, but that's going to be a big challenge for marketplaces and for digital merchants, is how do you build that trust with consumers? Because one of the things I personally struggle with is this pricing real, or is this discount really 60%, or is this inflated and then brought down? And if I walk into a store, will I still buy the product at the same price? Right. So I think that transparency, I think there's a bit of maturity that we need as well. Okay. So yeah.
That's interesting. Kenneth, do you have anything to add from a payments perspective in terms of why this might be a key moment of truth? Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry about that, guys. Just to add on to what Rahul's mentioned, I think three key points, again, just to echo, it stands out. One is that flexibility. So offering clients a variety of payment instruments that they feel comfortable with and trust. I think that is essential. I'll talk more on that. Pricing transparency, spot on. And then last one is security. I mean, you want to be making a payment using a payment instrument that is secured, that you won't be, in terms of your payment going missing and so forth. But I think what it comes down to is flexibility. For customers to be provided with the right payment capability at the point in time where they feel comfortable transacting with that. There was an interesting comment made around trust and clients not feeling comfortable putting their card details online. And it's one of the reasons why we at Nedbank are really looking at other payment instruments. We're exploring payment instruments in the instant EFT space. We've seen, and Rahul can maybe talk to in terms of the growth numbers in that, but because of that trust deficit, specifically around putting your card details online, with South Africa as a country, clients are voting with their feet and selecting to make their payments through means of instant EFT type of capabilities. But again, it comes down to flexibility, as I've mentioned, price transparency, and then security.
And you and I have spoken about this before, where the number of South Africans who have access to credit cards is relatively small too. So if you are a retailer and you want to open your potential business up to South Africans who don't have credit cards, you have to look at other solutions also.
But just on the, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so, and on there, and that's why I mentioned the instant EFT payment capability, because those are not card-based, but more bank account-based. The bank account penetration level in South Africa is quite high compared to the rest of the continent. So hence you'll find payment instruments like instant EFTs working pretty well, because it is not linked to a specific card, but rather to a bank account, which many South Africans they've got access to. Rahul?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to add one thing that, it's also an awareness and education problem with consumers, right? So yes, you were worried about using your credit card online or your card online, but there's an inherent protection built into all cards for consumers. You can dispute a transaction. As soon as you go EFTs and bank transfers, you lose that protection as a consumer. Right. So I think there's also a role that banks can play in educating the consumer, making that process easier for them. We had the same issue with debit orders in South Africa, and now suddenly all the banks have an easy way to, control what goes off your bank account, what doesn't. So I think it's also a broader education topic for consumers in South Africa.
Yeah. That's interesting. We actually had a question come through in the chat on that about, as part of the informing consumers. So I think you've just addressed that, but it's probably a bit of both. Now, kind of moving along down the line with the customer journey. So after somebody pays for their products, then it's okay, when do I get what it is that I've purchased? So Lars, could you share a little bit about why you think that delivery or getting the goods, whether that be from a pickup point or a delivery, why you think that that's an important moment of truth for customers?
Yeah, I mean, without delivery, there is no e-commerce, I think, because then the parcel will just be in the warehouse somewhere. So it's obviously essential to get the goods into the hands of the consumer. That's the end of the day what it's all about. If you just, if you look back, as I said, when I came to South Africa 8 years ago, but even today, if you look at the results of your research, it shows that it is one of the top reasons why people that are not buying online It's because they don't trust or they don't think their parcel will be delivered to them. I guess that's because they've had quite a lot of bad experience. So last mile logistics delivery is still one of the biggest challenges of e-commerce and of digital commerce in South Africa and on the continent. And I think what's interesting is that if you look over the last, let's say, 8, 10, maybe 15 years, there's been obviously a huge development globally, but also in South Africa in terms of digital change. People have smartphones, people have bank accounts, people have increased amount of people have internet access, internet penetration is rising. So it means that in both South Africa as the rest of the continent, the numbers say about 50 to 60% of the population these days have access in terms of their smartphone, in terms of the payment way to goods anywhere in the world. But the one thing that hasn't kind of leapfrog, that has changed overnight, is infrastructure, is logistics, right? So the reality of Africa, the reality of South Africa, is that there's still a lot of places that are very difficult to access. And that's really the core problem that we try and solve at Pargo. And what I mean by that is, if you live in the city center of Cape Town or Johannesburg, it's still reasonably easy for any courier company to deliver to your house or your office. But as soon as you live somewhere else, as soon as you live in a township, as soon as you live in a rural small town, or as soon as you live even in Johannesburg, there's a lot of these big gated communities, it's not easy for the courier to deliver to you. It's not easy and it's not cheap. And that's I think the biggest challenge in terms of e-commerce growth in Africa, and that's problem we try to solve. And we're doing that through, in our case, we're doing that through creating this network of pickup points, so allowing people to get a parcel delivered to a store and they can collect. But also by adding many other delivery options in terms of flexibility and accessibility, and really trying to help businesses access and deliver to their end user on time within a normal cost. I think if we can get those two things right, access it first of all at a normal cost and within the promised time, that's those are the three problems we're trying to solve. And I think that's really going to take e-commerce from where it is today to where we want it to be. The levels where it is globally at 10 to 20% of global of the commerce in the country. Still a long way to go, but I think especially this year we've seen a huge step forward, and I think on the right track to get there.
And on that same note, so you've touched on I think quite a few important points around what retailers need to be thinking about doing differently, to improve the experience and make it feasible for customers, feasible and a better experience, hopefully, for customers. From a payments perspective, Kenneth, what do you think businesses need to be doing to make those experiences more appealing? I mean, you spoke earlier about flexibility and transparency, but what about some of the kind of specifics behind that, or some of the solutions that you see happening out there?
Sure. I think just a comment on a point that Lars mentioned around the challenges around last mile delivery, and I just want to link that to payments, right, and customer behavior when it comes to payments. Interesting, but a stat that I saw was a couple of years ago was around e-commerce customers in South Africa preferring to pay cash because they did not trust in terms of that good would actually be delivered on time and not get damaged. So hence that, even though they had the means to pay via things like a card or via EFT, they preferred to pay cash on delivery because of that lack of trust in the last mile, let's call it delivery, let's call it capabilities. I just thought that was just an interesting linkage there. Yeah. In terms of retailers, I think as a bank, we're really flexible and offering our retail business clients a number of payment instruments. Specifically, I mean, if you look at from in-store purchases, having the right point of sale devices that can facilitate in terms of trade. And now with COVID, we've seen scan to pay type of technologies where clients don't feel comfortable, touching the point of sale devices. So rolling out technologies like that. But then on the e-commerce side, again, being very flexible in terms of the payment instruments that we provide them there. Traditionally, you've got the EFT payments. We're now also working on instant EFT capabilities, and then the traditional card. So those are just, a number of payment instruments that as banks, we providing to retail business clients so that they, in terms of can then provide that to their customers as flexible options.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like those flexibility of options is huge. It's interesting though, this the comment that you were making about trust and not trusting the delivery, wanting to pay in cash. Do you guys think that trust is a lack of trust in the retailer? Is it a lack of trust in the last mile? Like where is the broken trust happening? Where do you guys think it's happening?
A bit of a combination. Obviously, when e-commerce started in South Africa, and your stats that you showed prove that it goes wrong quite a bit, in terms of logistics, at least. Let's talk about that bit. But what I think we all forget is, the reasons, the reason behind why our couriers, so to start something like 50% of people said that it was too late. Why is it too late? We see at the point in our stat, we see that 99.5% of our deliveries are on time. So how can that be such a big thing? And the main issue that couriers give is, again, the reason why we started this business is that they try to deliver to your place, but you're not at home, right? So you as a consumer might think, I stayed at home all day, but you forget that you actually went to pick up your kids. And the courier told you they'll deliver on Monday, and you were home the whole day, but you went to pick up your kids between 3 and 4, and that was exactly what was there. Or again, you live in an informal settlement, and there is not a proper address, so the courier can't find you. Right? They're trying to find you. They're there, they're driving around, they just can't find you. So those things cause a lack of trust. But what's also interesting is that with our click and collect model, we do that. We build our own network of stores, where a network of pickup points, and basically anybody here who's not can just get a fast delivery there. But we also do this internally in-house for companies like Clicks, whereby they do click and collect within their own stores. And we see that, especially if it's within the same brand, a Clicks client buying the Clicks website, going into their own store, we see that the percentage of people using it is quite high, significantly higher than the other one. So I don't have scientific, research behind that, but anecdotally, what we do think that's the reason is again that trust, is that feeling that I buy something online from Clicks, I go and collect it in the store, that I'm there. If something is wrong with my parcel, there's a manager in the store that I can speak to. There's somebody that can solve that problem. So I think the way of solving that problem is getting it right more often. And I do think we are getting it more right as an industry. I think e-commerce as an industry as well. And you can see that, right? Again, the growth is there. We see more people using it every day, and there's more people that are starting to trust the service. They're starting to trust online purchases, and I think it's going in the right direction. But it's like that is the big thing we're all working on, just improving and setting the bar higher and making sure that the service that we offer doesn't disappoint and that people come back. I mean, it's just that simple, but I think that is the main reason.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that a lot of organizations maybe don't understand is how important it is to get these experiences right, and how one wrong turn or one bad experience could turn a customer off entirely. And then you don't see that. You don't know. I mean, those customers just kind of quietly drift away. There's no notification that they were disappointed and they just stop shopping with you, or they go for another solution. And I think these bad experiences are sort of like the silent killer of brands if you don't kind of pay attention to them. But it can be really hard to track them, to understand when they happen. Another thing that I'm hearing from you guys as we're talking about this topic is the importance of the collaboration between retailers and the providers who are offering these solutions, because more often than not, the consumer, from their perspective, at least in the journeys that I've mapped in this space, the consumer starts the journey with the e-commerce company, and in their mind, it's a purchase with Takealot or a purchase with Clicks, and that's how they're sort of following it through in their mind, even if the delivery is, happens through another partner. What do you guys think needs to happen in terms of collaboration between retailers and the providers who, have the solutions to help these things happen? What kind of collaboration needs to happen in that space? Kenneth, do you have any ideas on this one?
Sure. I think on the retailer side, journey mapping and understanding, what are those customer touch points between your application from an e-commerce perspective, linking into payments, which you'll find payment aggregators or banks, into the delivery systems. So making sure you've got those journeys mapped out and well articulated and understood. And then leveraging technologies like APIs, right, for seamless integrations to ensure that customer's journey remains frictionless. And that can be through the use of payment API capabilities. Pargo, I'm sure they've got APIs as well. And then plugging these, making use of these APIs technologies and linking it into the retailers' platforms. And then what underpins all of that is analytics, making sure that you can track in terms of the different touch points within that customer journey that you've put together, that you can get real-time insights and that your teams can act on that across that, let's call it, customer journey.
Maybe one thing to add, I think the last thing I would add to that, Kenneth, is communication. So it's one of the things we have, is people make mistakes, we make mistakes, but communicate them. If we tell you we're going to deliver tomorrow, but something happens, the driver, got a flat tire and couldn't finish his route, communicate, right? Let your customers know that something happened and inform them when the parcel will be delivered. And if you do that, it makes a huge difference instead of just not delivering. Right?
Spot on. Yeah.
one of the things like we see a lot, and especially when we work with the larger retailers, right, is just kind of mapping out some of those processes upfront, right? So it's easy to make the sale, like to get the consumer to pay you. But one of the most complicated challenges for retailers then is what do we do with returns, right? And then like I go back when we did this research in the US for those large retailers, one of the biggest drivers for digital commerce was free shipping and free returns, right? Like those were the two biggest hitting items that someone could invest in and that would drive digital sales. So, the logistics of returns is also pretty complicated. And it again, it comes back to logistics and payments, right? So how do you get that product back into your warehouse or your store? And then how do you get the money back to the consumer? I think, that plays a fundamental role in that customer's experience and building that trust at the end of the day. And if you think about it, we've all probably read that book, Delivering Happiness, and how Zappos built, their entire shoe online retailing business around free returns, 365 days of free returns. So you're trying to lower the hurdles and the friction for the consumer at the end of the day to try it. That's what's happened with COVID. A lot of consumers in South Africa have been pushed out of their comfort zone, tried the convenience of digital commerce, and will probably never go back, right? But how can we get broader adoption? It's targeting these friction points and trying to reduce them for the consumers.
So that's a really interesting point that you're bringing up about consumers trying e-commerce during COVID and not going back. And I wanted to ask you also, Rahul, from a data perspective, I would imagine that, you guys see fluctuations in volumes with your different providers. What have you guys seen? I mean, have you seen that where there was this massive surge and then a drop off? Can you look at that kind of at a customer level? I'm super curious to hear what you've seen.
Actually, that's exactly what we track. When we kind of started looking at COVID around mid-February and started to wonder if, what's the impact going to be. And to be honest, when South Africa announced a whole lockdown, we were a bit worried about April, right? So we work with businesses across industries, whether it's travel, ticketing, retail, all these on-demand grocery deliveries, data and ISPs, so a whole range of industries. And what we saw was actually almost a bifurcation in volumes across. So we, in our merchant base, we categorized all our merchants into different industries. And then we saw travel and ticketing drop to like almost, less than 5% of the volume they were doing in January. And then we had particular segments like data and ISPs. So we do all the payments for Rain, for example, which is a mobile network, and like we do all these on-demand grocery deliveries. So One Cart, Bottles, Quench, right? And we could see the surge in usage across these different industries, right? As South Africa eased restrictions on online retail, I think in the 1st of May, essential goods were now allowed for online retail. Then 1st of June, liquor delivery became available for online purchases as well. And suddenly you could see these, segments shooting up. So we saw a massive step increase in just digital commerce across the board in May, and we've seen that sustained, right? So one idea was, hey, it's just a temporary surge because people can't go out anymore and they still need these products. But even now in September, October, we're still seeing that sustain, and we're in level 1 now, right? So I think for us, that data points to the fact that there is a fundamental shift in consumer behavior, right? Consumers do, COVID has helped digital commerce push people out and say, you have to try it. And once you try it, you love that convenience, right? And then these people become repeat customers. So I think that fundamental shift has happened, and some of these industries will never go back to how they used to be.
I mean, I think that was one of the big questions that people had was, is this behavior shift going to be temporary or is it going to endure? And it's interesting to hear that it's enduring. And I mean, I agree. I think it will COVID is sticking around, and it will definitely have a permanent impact on a whole lot of industries, or long-lasting impact. Lars, from a logistics perspective, is the data that you've seen echo what Raul was saying they've seen on the payment side?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we obviously, when actual lockdown level 5 happened, we're an essential company. We could deliver some goods, but most businesses closed down. But then after that, we're just seeing a huge surge in terms of volumes. And I would say, it's growing. We as a business now, volumes are growing because of 2 reasons. A, because the clients that we already had are just doing more volumes, more people are buying online. But B, e-commerce as a channel, as a delivery, as a sales channel, has just risen in terms of priority. And we speak to a lot of the big corporates, the big retail chains, and I would say maybe every big retail chain in Africa has an e-commerce website. The difference is that some of them have been taking it quite seriously over the last years, and some of them less. And what we've picked up is that the way I just assume this happens is that there's somebody that's the head of e-commerce reporting, and then but the CEO level and the exec level is not. It's maybe priority 10. And obviously, in those last 6 months, e-commerce has just gone from priority whatever it was to priority top 3. Right? It was basically the only way to do retail. So that is just a huge shift in mindset, shift in priorities, shift in everything. And it shows because the number in South Africa has been for too many years 1%. 5 years ago, I could read e-commerce is now 1% of total retail. But a year ago it was 1.2%, right? So it didn't really make a big difference. I've heard now from a few of the really big retailers that it's now between 4 and 5% of the total sales. Yes, it also has to do that the total sales come down slightly, but it's more because everybody is looking at online. And I think those 2 things really are there to stay. If we look at the last couple of months, we saw maybe September was the only month where it kind of flattened out a little bit, but now in October again, it's taking off. We're expecting a very, very big Black Friday and season. And I don't think it's going to go back to old levels. I think this is really that watershed moment that the whole industry has been waiting for. Again, people say e-commerce is 1%. Meant, it's small. It still has a lot of growth to happen. I think that's now finally happening. I'm pretty sure it's going to stay there for the foreseeable future. We're excited and bullish about
it. Julia, if I may, in terms of just sustaining in terms of e-commerce growth in South Africa, I think there's a lot that we can actually learn from the United States as well. We've seen with the Amazon obviously launching Amazon Prime in terms of creating this loyalty program with its customers. That's sustained in terms of usage, people going online and buying products through Amazon. And I think for a lot of retailers, those are things that they should consider to say, right, if we want to contain these numbers on e-commerce, what are the loyalty propositions that we're actually going to put in place that encourages buying things online? And then in that, when customers have complaints or disputes, how do you tie that back to that program to say, all right, this product was damaged because you're part of this loyalty program. Your next product purchase, 10, 20% off. So I do think that retailers need to really think about loyalty propositions to ensure that sustained growth. Then there was another comment on the township economy. Because I think South Africa, we live in a divided society, right? Developed and developing. And I think the township economy is still I think still a huge opportunity. And I think the ticket sizes in terms of purchasing items from an e-commerce perspective might not be high, but I do think it is a unique opportunity for last mile delivery, into that space as well. And I think that could be quite a lucrative market as well. I mean, there's a lot of numbers there. Raul, you wanted to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing around just the whole impact of COVID and what we saw from businesses, right? So yes, we saw an acceleration of larger retailers, enterprises suddenly saying, hey, I need to launch this online store in the next 1 month. But 85%, we saw our merchant signups increase over 6x between February and May and June. And 85% of those were SMEs, right? Because a lot of physical store retailers during lockdown, your store is closed. So the only way to build resilience in your business, the only revenue channel available to you as a small business was online, right? So what businesses are also learning is it's not a nice to have, it's almost a need to have, because if there is another pandemic, if there is another lockdown, if there is another crisis, then that's the only channel you can generate sales, right? We saw merchants having sales in April, kind of enticing or inviting customers to spend now and will deliver when we're allowed to deliver. So we saw a lot of consumers actually committing to purchases in April with the fact that they will get the delivery when the business is allowed to get delivery. So businesses were able to build resilience. And I think that's an important factor that a lot of SMEs and large retailers realized during this crisis as well.
Yeah, and that's really important for the, sort of resilience of the economy. If we take a step back and think about kind of the bigger picture here in terms of resilience of, the economy, you don't want a situation where you've got, all the SMEs shutting down. I mean, that would be absolutely horribly damaging. Yeah. I want to chat for a second, Kenneth, you brought up kind of accessibility to everybody within South Africa. So people who live in the township, people who live elsewhere. One of the things that we found in our research that we spoke about in one of yesterday's webinars was how some customers are we were looking at omni-channel, the topic of omni-channel. There are a lot of customers who will do research online, but then go in store to make a purchase. And I might stand to be corrected here by Amanda, but I believe that it's the younger consumers and also consumers with a lower overall household income who are more likely to do their research online and then go and make a purchase in store than those who were open to making the purchase online and then signing up for delivery. What do you think? Do you think that solutions like Pargo will help improve accessibility? What do you think needs to happen in this ecosystem to really open it up to all South Africans?
Sure. I think, again, it comes down to trust, right? There's a reason why a client would do the research and then walk into a store because, in the store they can buy it, they can they can touch it. And I think it comes down to trust again. So how do these retailers within their journeys enable, let's call it, trust with the customers? And in doing that, again, I think a key pain point is last mile delivery, trust in that last mile delivery capability. And if we look at, again, as I've mentioned, the township economy, what does coverage look like from a last mile delivery in those areas? Because it's one thing to purchase an item online, but it's another thing, for that item to be delivered securely to that customer in that location. So I think, some of the questions that these customers has is, in terms of coverage. And I think whether it's Pargo or any other service provider in the logistics space, if they can solve for that, then I do think, there'll be trust in the system whereby clients will go, especially those, residing in the likes of the township economy, will then go in, buy online because they know that their products will be delivered. But perhaps maybe Lars has some insights around that. Maybe there's something that they've been working on. But that's just my perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that. I think it's trust, not just in the delivery. It's back to your first few slides, Julia. It's trust in payments, trust in the website, trust in delivery. It's everything there together. And I think if you look at the markets in South Africa, the reality, what I was saying before, the reality is that e-commerce is still quite young. I think the first phase that we've kind of gone through has been focusing on not on the township economy, on the main centers, on the places where where it's easier to get to deliver. I think this is the next phase that we're going to go through. The next phase we're going to go in. And it's different. I mean, one of the insights or thing is super interesting happening globally or actually across the continent in countries like Nigeria and Kenya is that a lot of the younger buyers are now not even looking at big platforms like Jumia or the big e-commerce players, but are using Instagram and social media to actually directly WhatsApp directly buy from merchants. Right? So the marketplaces are shifting a bit away. And then also like e-commerce starts becoming almost a bit of an formal trade. So yeah, it's to kind of look at it. So it's interesting like how that's going to develop in South Africa and how businesses like ours and then I guess all others can jump into the opportunity and get it right.
I just want to add one thing here. I think it's also a problem of access, right? Like, so if you think about the informal settlements, how good is internet access? Like, that's one of the things we've been tracking is like, on our platform, we see almost 74% of all transactions are from a mobile device, right? So in Africa, consumers are not mobile first, it's actually mobile only because that's the only way they can access the internet. And then the cost of data. Right. So I think these are the big hurdles for broader adoption of digital commerce is just access to data, right? You now have players like Too Much Wi-Fi and some of these guys providing Wi-Fi access or, a reasonably priced data access in these townships and in these informal settlements. I think that's the first place, to really start. We also see, and it's amazing. For the last 8 years, this has held true. Volumes during the weekdays between 9 to 5, versus what we see on the weekends. It's like 20%, on the weekends of what is in the weekdays. So people are accessing the internet from the offices, right? Once they, that's where they have high-speed data access, high-speed internet access. That's when people are buying. Like it is week after week, year after year, it's exactly that pattern. 9 to 5 weekdays, right? Pay week comes. So there are all these I think these factors also that are playing into adoption of digital commerce. And from a broader South African adoption, I think we got to solve for some of these fundamental factors.
Maybe just one last thing. I think as I was saying that we also have to take into account there's a difference between, we're talking about e-commerce, something like Takealot's really setting up an Amazon model. But we shouldn't forget that there's different types of e-commerce, I would say more digital commerce kind of happening in South Africa and happening across the continent. So a lot of our clients are not your pure e-commerce players, but are big businesses that, we work with telecommunication businesses, insurance companies, banks, right? So, helping, for instance, the banks with distribution of cards into townships. And in that space, we have seen, again, the model working. We have quite a lot of pickup points in informal settlements across the country. And it's maybe not your pure e-commerce, it's maybe not a new pair of the most expensive Nikes or, a flat screen TV, but it's a SIM card or a package or like an insurance package or a bank card being delivered to these people. So I think in that way, in that matter, we have we're seeing some really promising results. I guess the next step is to get your pure e-commerce players to start tapping into those channels.
So we've had some questions come through on the chat, and I just wanted to, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that participants were able to have their questions answered. We've talked a bit about the townships and, access to, different segments of the economy and different consumer groups, but there were some questions here earlier about, kind of how informed consumers are. how informed online sellers are about solutions that are out there. You know, and it also looks like kind of how informed retailers might be around some of the solutions that are out there, and also how they might design their offer around payments and delivery. So do you guys see that there's kind of a big education piece that needs to happen with retailers? Or are they pretty clued into how they can make these journeys more seamless and improve experiences? What are you guys seeing as you interact with, you know, the key stakeholders in industry?
Let me try. So I think, again, it comes down to having the data analytics capability to fully understand, you know, where these drop-off points are, right? And then as a retailer, having the ability to educate and respond your customer appropriately and educate them on that. So it's combining your analytics capability and insights and then utilizing those as action points to then drive the right communication in the form of education to your clients. And I think, yeah, that's essential. Yeah.
So all of you have brought up really interesting data points throughout this conversation. And it kind of got me thinking to that point, you know, what are the lines of communication like between you and, you know, your teams and the retailers that you work with in terms of sharing this data and consumer insights? Is there a lot of information sharing that's going on? Do the retailers already know these things? How does that sort of aspect of the collaboration look?
So for us, at least from a payments perspective, you know, it's an everyday conversation, right? And because retailers are so focused on success rates, on conversion, it's, you know, it's especially with the larger merchants, it's something we are constantly talking to them about, you know, and it's also about we actually go vertically up in the supply chain and even engage with banks, right? So we've had conversations with the issuers of cards and saying, hey, why is this particular transaction not going through? And helping the entire value chain identify and reduce those hurdles, right? So that at the end of the day, the consumer can purchase that. So absolutely, I mean, for the retailer, that's the role, you know, that's why these guys work with us, is we are constantly actually proactively advising them and saying, hey, you need to think about this because we're seeing this as a pattern, or here's a solution that we've come up with to solve a problem. We think you should try it out. So from a payments perspective, it's part of our merchant retention, right? Like we want to engage with these guys because we want to solve these problems for them. Because at the end of the day, if our merchants do well, we grow with them. So it's a simple growth strategy as well for us. So it's absolutely core on our side.
Lars, from a Pargo perspective, what does that kind of information and insight sharing look like?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as Roel said, it's basic. I mean, you need to provide data, provide insight, provide everything that's happening on the whole process. So that's, you know, that happens with us all the time, every day as well. That's basically what the whole system does, right? That's as a technology business, that's what we're doing. We're giving an insight in the delivery process and showing them where things are, if things are going wrong, where it's going wrong, and, you know, how it can be better. So yeah, that's I mean, that's definitely part of it. And I think to your question about, you know, informing the industry, there's also a lot of companies now rising that's their business model. There's training, e-commerce training businesses. You know, a lot of these kind of webinars happening. The big platforms, the big marketplaces do that, you know, continuously. I know that a company like BidOrBuy has, like, almost every weekend has training events happening across the country. Or I guess it's online now. You know, so that's obviously part of what's happening. So as the industry is growing, as this channel is growing, then more and more people are also training in that space.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like there's lots of learning to be happening, and as consumers continue to change and evolve, it will be important that you know, everybody who is a part of this ecosystem, regardless of the role they play, you know, stays up to date on what's happening. And for us as a team doing the research, you know, we're excited to contribute to the knowledge base through our research on this. And with that, I think we should wrap up because I think we're pretty much at time. So I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today, and to our panel of experts for sharing their insights. I'd also like to thank Charlie Stewart, Amanda Reiki, and the teams at Roger Wilco and Over to You for their collaboration on the report and this webinar series. If you've enjoyed this webinar, we've got recordings of the previous 2 webinar topics, which will be available soon, as well as a recording for this one. And of course, the 2020 customer experience, digital customer experience report itself is available for download on all of our websites. So with that, thank you very much to everybody.